you shouldn't have to hit them again. You know, if you know how to throw, then you drive them into the ground, and that is the end. You don't need to punch. And I have a real problem when I watch people doing a takedown and then they step over the person and then reach down to try and hit them. G'day guys, and welcome back to Karate Over Coffee. I'm your host, Cheyne McMahon. Now today, someone in our Karate Over Coffee community, our Facebook group, one of the members asked me for my thoughts on Kata bunkai. However, before we get into that, I think we need to really understand the purpose or the meaning of kata in what it actually is. I've said it before, but karate is many things for many people. You know, whether you do it as a sport, for competition, for self-development, to be a fighter, to be fitter, stronger, whatever your reason is, there are many. And the same can be applied for kata. You know, kata can be a way for you to get stronger and fitter. Can be a way for you to learn sports kata competition as well. There's also, and for me, a way to bury the offensive and defensive methods deep down into our muscle memory, right down into our bones. So that's a really big reason that I practice kata. I teach kata for other reasons, for competition and sometimes for cultural remembrance as well, and to get fitter and stronger and those sorts of things. But for when I practice my kata, I want to achieve functional spontaneity. Now, I did borrow that term from somebody, but I really liked it. To achieve functional spontaneity. And I'm going to say from in my karate system, what other people do, they can do whatever they want. But for me, in my kata system, we have two types of counting in our kata. So we have one where it's a step by step, so each individual move, and the other is a sequence. So for example, if we look at Naifanchi Shodan, or Teki Shodan, or Nahanchi Shodan, we do a 40 count, so step by step. And for our sequence, it's 28. So in the step by step, it's 20 on the one side and 20 on the other side, and 14 for the sequence. So for an example, just at the opening, so Naifanchi Shodan step by step. Now I've written it down so I don't make any mistakes. So each first count is look to the right, and then count two, ni, is step over the other foot. San is a little knee and open hand strike. 4 is elbow. 5 is ikite and look the hand into the side. So that's the first 5 movements of our step by step. But when we're looking at Naifanchi Shodan as a sequence, then we look at the start. 1, look. 2, step. 3, it's open hand and elbow. So those two moves go together. 4, we look and hands into the side. 5, it's downward block and punch, for an example. So those two movements go together. So instead of doing 7 moves, seven counts, it's 5, because the open hand and the elbow are together, and the downward block and punch is together. So we look at that, and so the way we differentiate it is the techniques that are together. They are the application, or they're the reason why they're together, is because they fit together. They are the same movement or the same set of techniques. So when we look at kata, we distinguish which techniques are for physical education and which techniques are for effective practice. So we look at 4 categories of techniques in kata. So 1 is a connective movements, or the pattern, what the shape of the kata looks like, the starting and finishing point, the different angles of kata. So that's one aspect. The second one is the physical exercise of it, building stronger, fitter bodies, increasing your agility, increasing your speed. The third part we look at is kionwaza, or the repeated practice of the kata kion. So that's the kionwaza, or however you want to call it, the fundamental techniques. I don't like the term basics because that's a weird term, but I think fundamentals is a better word to use than basics if you're looking at kion or kionwaza. And the fourth one, and what everybody wants and what everybody loves, and is the application. So using the kata movements to stop somebody trying to hurt you or hurt a loved one, right? So that's the way we look at it. So using the kata movements to stop somebody, a bad guy or bad girl, somebody trying to hurt you, or hurt somebody that you're with. So when we look at the unique sequences or series of techniques in each kata, and we teach kumigata based off these unique sequences. So something that's like a unique part or sections that separate that kata from different kata, something that is very unique just to that kata, that's not found in any other kata, or not found in any other kata in your system, in your system. So so kumigata, if you didn't know, is what we call the bunkai. So the kumi is exchanging hands or the swapping hands, and if you're listening to this, I'm actually punching and moving, but and so the swapping hands and gata. So it's kumi gata. So in Japanese, when there's a K sound, it becomes a G, like or a stronger k. Instead of, it's not, we put a G there because it's close to English, but it's a strong K sound or a k. So it becomes kumigata, and it's probably easier for us just to write it in English as a G rather than two Ks. For example, I know in Korean they do. So Korean and Japanese are similar. They follow the same sort of pattern on how to write and read and whatnot, but Korea have their own unique characters, whereas so does Japan, I suppose, but they've got the three systems, whereas Korea have their own Hangul, it's called, or their unique way to write. It's phonetic, unlike Japanese or Chinese characters where you have to know the character. In Korean, you can actually read it phonetically, so that makes it a lot easier as a foreigner trying to navigate around Korea. Side note, of course, if you haven't listened to those little espresso shots, jump in and have a look. There's Korea Part 1 and Korea Part 2. There'll be a few more coming out as well. But anyway, let's get back to the kumigata. So it's when it's a partner drill. So two people are engaged in a drill. So there's an attack and a defense. So when you're practicing with a partner, the method is to understand the application, and we look at it in this order. So you have iri, or the attack or entering. So not necessarily the person, the bad guy. Let's just call him bad guy. The bad guy's attack, but it can also be your attack. Not waiting for somebody to attack you. You take the first approach, and I think that's really important when we're looking at kata. It's not all defensive. It can't be all defensive. If in a combat situation, you can't wait for somebody to attack before you attack, right? And the same can apply when you're looking at kata. It can be you as a person who is in being bullied or grabbed or whatever. You can attack first. Definitely. So we call it attack or entering. Either of those. We've got the uke to block or receive. Jam is another way you could call it as well. Hazushi is to escape or release or to strike, as in somebody's grabbed and you've released. So if you've hit them, they've grabbed you, for example, then that can be the release. If they've hit you and you've blocked, then your response is bang. It could be one or two, and everything is needed to to do the next part, which is a toride or the grappling or joint locks, throws, takedowns, something that's going to finish. Just on that throws as well, just as a side note, when we do a takedown or a throw, we pick the person up and we throw them into the ground. When we're practicing in the dojo, we have to hold the person and gently take them down, because we want to practice that again and again and again, and we want those members to come back. But in reality, we really just want to throw the person down to the ground, and I think that's because we've practiced. And I want to say I mean karate, because we practice a safe takedown. That it's like it's not the end of the attack, which it really is. So if you throw somebody down to the ground, that's a finish. You shouldn't have to hit them again. You know, if you know how to throw, then you drive them into the ground, and that is the end. You don't need to punch. And I have a real problem when I watch people doing a takedown and then they step over the person and then reach down to try and hit them. If they grab your arm, then you are in some serious trouble. So when we do a throw, that's it. We don't follow up. If we do follow up, if we have to, it's kicks and moving around. It's not punches. You're off balance. You're reaching down to hit somebody. I think it's. I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of it, and I always tell it to my students. So anyway, let's get back to what we're looking at. So we've got the attack or the entering, the uke, the hatsushi, the escape, release, the strike, and the grappling. So that's the order it goes in. Now it doesn't have to go. You don't have to do all of them because you've got the attack, and then there might be straight to. So you've got the attack, for example. You've got the block, and then you may go straight into a grapple. You may go straight into a takedown. Maybe no need for a response, especially if you jam them and then their armors become floppy and no need to do anything else. You just throw them to the floor. But really important here is it can also be taught by kuden or word of mouth. There are many kuden to explain the movements of kata. So when we're teaching kata, when you're teaching the physical part of the kata, you can I talk to my students about what this is and why we do this. So the kuden can be just when they're training in the kata. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to do the applications every single time. So it's important that when you're explaining, you do the kuden, because when you're at home practicing the kata, you have nobody. Well, generally you don't have anybody to practice with. So you've got to remember the kuden, why we do open hand, these sorts of things. So I wrote down an example of a kumigata sequence that we have for Naifanchi Shodan. So the opening, so hand. So these are the kumigata sequences in Naifanchi Shodan. So I look at the unique sections of the kata. So there are five. Well, I think there are 5 parts of Naifanchi Shodan that's not found in other kata, or certainly that may be found in other kata, but that other kata have more unique features, because Naifanchi Shodan is a very short kata. So we look at the open hand and elbow. So that's the first part. We've got inside, downward and back knuckle strike. We've got the downward sweep and hook, hook punch. I'm using air quotes there, but then you've got the inside leg kick, and so you've got the inside and outside. Looks like a uchuke and a sotuke, or an inside block and an outside block, using your foot. 1, 2. So we put them together because we look at it being the same kata, the same kumigata. It'll depend on what leg the person has forward and what punch they're using, if you're inside or outside. So that's how we look at that part. And then the 5th one is the rear hand defending and the front hand striking. So, or this, the end of the last movement of Naifanchi Shodan, on both sides. So that's that's the kumigata sequences that we use for knife punchi shodan. So depending on the kata and how many unique sections are in the kata will sort of dictate the different kumigata sets for that kata. So knife punchi nidan, for example, has 2 unique sections. That's only found in knife punchi nidan, whereas the other parts of knife punchi nidan is just knife punchi shodan. So that begs the question, you know, what's the point of knife punchi nidan? But anyway, I like knife punchi nidan because I really enjoy this part where somebody grabs, you put your hand on top and you throw them. And anyway, I like that part of knife punchi nidan. That's why I keep knife punchi nidan. I don't like knife punchi sandan, so I don't do it. So, and that's the reason I don't teach the pinan kata to the adults, or the so-called bunkai, because I believe that the unique sequences of pinan kata are already found in the other kata, kosokun, knife punch, pesai, for example. They're already there, so I don't want to teach the same. I don't want to double up on the teaching. So if we look at the opening moves of knife punchi shodan, we have an open hand and then an elbow strike. So the iri or the attack or the entering for this part, we use this as an entering position. We don't wait for the person to attack. Instead, we use our fingers to the eyes, or if you've got coins, Coke can, small child, whatever, your mobile phone, so you throw it bang into the person's eyes, and if it's fingers to the eyes, even better, but if it's a distraction, that's good too. So after this, you reach in behind, just grab around the back of the neck, pull down, and we elbow strike, and from there we do a neck crank for a takedown. So that's the opening part we look at. So in this kumigata sequence, the attacker doesn't really do much, but they need to be able to move for you when you're doing a neck crank and after the fingers to the eyes and those sorts of things. So actually for this part we do two parts for this one, because if I do fingers to the eyes and I reach to grab the neck and he moves back or she moves back, then instead of elbowing, I follow up with a punch, because the distance is different. So instead of following the person and grabbing the neck, we deliver a punch straight away, and then we use a neck crank. Depending on the class, we may, instead of doing a neck crank, we may just use the shoulders as a takedown in the same sort of way, depending on who's there and those sorts of things. And neck crank can be kind of scary for some. So we just use the same idea, the same movement, the same thoughts, the same twist, but we use the shoulders. So we just grab the outside of the gi or the shirt and move them the same way. So that's how we use example for as an offense rather than as a defense. But in pasai, so the opening for pasai, for example, we utilize the arm as a block or a cover. So the attack, so the iri is a hook punch. So if it's a right hand hook punch, then I cover with my left hand. This is important. Can't be the other way. Can't be right hand to right hand, because that is a different opening, a different response, and a different kumigata. This kumigata, it was when it's right hand hook punch and I'm receiving with my left hand. So it's a toe to toe, for example, right hand to left hand. So I block, and then bang, I use my arm to come up as under the chin. Now, this is where the kuden comes into. This is where I talk about it depends on what. So the response of the uppercut will depend on the size of the person. I mean, if somebody's smaller than me, hook punches me, there's no way I can do an uppercut. I mean, I'm 6'2", so it wouldn't work. And the same as if it was the other way, I'm too tall for an uppercut. So you can utilize the same technique, but or the same principles. So left hand left-hand block, and your right hand can go straight into the body or straight into the throat, whatever the response is. But as long as there is a response. But in Pasai, if you're watching on YouTube, it's this action. Boom. Here, 1, 2. This is how we utilize Pasai. 1, 2, and then from there, after the hook punch, then we use a shoulder throw. So your right hand after the strike, bang, whatever the response is. If it's 2 punches, a kick, then the right hand hooks, snakes under the shoulder, and we use the left hand like we're putting on a seatbelt, and a nice little shoulder throw as we turn 90 degrees. Oh no, 180 degrees. My math isn't good. So when we turn 180 degrees, so foot down, and then we twist, and down they go. And definitely after that, nothing else needed. You know, the person's on the ground, you're running away. You shouldn't be there punching or. I know obviously every situation is different. You can't always run away, but that is the idea. So we've got the attack, we've got the block, we've got the response, and then we have the grapple. So we've been looking at, when I say we, it's my dad. My dad has been doing karate for a long time, and he's been trying to understand kata and understand kata movements for, you know, since he sort of started. So in the 80s, you know, the block and punch response, or the ippon kumite type distance, where somebody steps forward and punches and you step back and do an upward block and a punch. I mean, that's impractical if we're looking at a self-defense, and that was a bunkai, the applications of what my dad was taught, and anyway, it led us to learning from many different people and understanding more about kata. And in the 90s, we looked at you applying, if it was a downward block, for example, or gedanuke, or what's this, gedanparai. It could be used as a throw, or it could be used as a strangle, or it could be used. So we've moved away from that. I know people are still doing it, but I don't think it's helpful for karate. I think you're better off practicing just a certain amount of responses to attacks, rather than fitting a square peg into a round hole for 65 different applications for an upper block. I mean, you know, I think for kata, for kata is, and understanding kata and bunkai and applications, the way I look at it is, I want the response. I want to not think about what I would do. I want to achieve functional spontaneity. Now, I struggle to even say spontaneity. My English isn't fantastic. English is my second language. So it's not, but I've been hit in the head too many times. But achieving functional spontaneity. So when somebody grabs me, for example, or hook punches me, headbutts me, whatever the attack is, I want my karate to be straight away, bang, 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 bang. And you can see straight out of Naifanchi. There we go, baby. Straight out of Naifanchi. So that's the way that I look at it. And so for our kumigata, if we go back to the kumigata, we have certain responses for the or certain sequences for each kata. Anyway, look, I hope that makes sense. That's the way that we look at kata. You know, I stopped trying to dream up applications. Excuse me, for 50 different versions of a downward block. You know, I don't think it's healthy for your karate. But anyway, if you have any questions, let me know. Man, I'm always happy to chat about karate and obviously kata applications, and I may be totally off, but that's where I am at the moment. So we've moved away from the 90s idea, like the 1990s idea of what if, you could use it for this, you could use it for that, you could use it for this, you could use it for that. That looks like it's coming out of Pina Nidan, that looks like it's coming out of Koshokundai, that looks like it's coming out of Seisan, or looking at Jiu-Jitsu or Judo and go, that could be applied for Gankaku, for example. I don't need to do that anymore. I've done that and we've moved on. We've moved on to a different part of karate, and it seems to be working for us. So look, thanks again for listening, guys, or watching if you're on YouTube. And if you have any questions, let me know. Chuck it in the Karate Over Coffee community Facebook group. Otherwise, I'll chat to you soon. See ya. Thank you for listening to Karate Over Coffee. And if you're enjoying the podcast and getting something out of the episodes, there are a few things you can do to help us. If you don't already subscribe to us on YouTube, please do so. We release these episodes every Friday morning, Australian time. Plus, we release some smaller espresso shots during the week on both our YouTube channel and our Facebook community group. You can also subscribe to us on our Apple or Spotify. Leaving a 5-star review will be very beneficial as well. If you have any suggestions or topics or feedback or anything that you want to talk about, please put it in our comment section on our Karate Over Coffee community Facebook group. If you'd like to support us, please visit our online shop where we have official Karate Over Coffee shirts, hoodies and mugs available. Your continued support is appreciated and a vital way for the podcast to keep moving forward. Thanks, guys.